Hey everyone, it's Wednesday. It's time to sketch. Really, it's time to sketch because I'm back and we're gonna have a good time. Now, I've had a few questions about reflections and how those work and metallic surfaces, and I thought I would combine that into one video that kind of covered some principles, I guess, that would guide you to sketch metallic things. So, we're gonna use markers. So, if you have your Copic or Prismacolor or any marker, grab those. We're going to use some pencil and perhaps some pen, because that was a request from people as well. What pens do I use? That kind of thing. So, let's get to it. So the first thing I need to do, since I have this wonderfully blank piece of paper, is sketch something metallic, or some object rather. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about reflection. So let's imagine that we have a line that represents the ground, and there's a giant mirror here, okay? And this orange thing represents a person looking into the mirror. Now our mirror works such that any light ray hitting it reflects at an angle that is the same as the light incident to that mirror. In other words, say for example, as I'm looking at this mirror, and how you see an object really is all about the light that is hitting an object. So if you consider the camera looking at me and seeing me in this environment, everything you see or the camera sees is a result of the light rays that are hitting the sensor in the camera. There's light hitting my face, which bounces back to the sensor and gives it a certain color and brightness and richness. The sensor picks that up, translates, and stores that as video footage. Our eyes do the same thing. So, in this example, as a light ray hits me, goes to the mirror, whatever, you could describe it as something like this little dotted line. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. There we go. So this little dotted line hits the mirror, and because it hits the mirror dead on, it's going to bounce right back, and I'm going to see this point as it were in the mirror, okay? And what you see in the mirror is called an image. So the image at this point will be the same. Now, if I were to observe my foot, okay, so there's a light ray from my foot that's going to hit the mirror, okay? And if I observe my foot in the mirror and project that line out, what you'll find is that this distance out is going to be the same. So this blue point here corresponds with my foot through there. Again, the reason is incident to the mirror. If I split this angle, these two angles, I and R, are equal to each other. So if I observe, and you can do this with a variety of lines. So let's say there's a light ray hitting my face, and light is going to hit your face at a variety of angles. Okay, so it's incident to the mirror at that point. I can go back, and if I project out like so, and this line through, I should come out somewhere there, where essentially you then see the mirror of yourself. Now, the thing that you'll notice is that, or the most important thing rather, is that this distance x, okay, from where you are to the mirror, is going to be equal to this distance y, where your image is represented in the mirror, to the mirror. So things that are reflected in a mirror appear to be the same distance away from that plane as they are in real life. That's just how an image works. Now, I know this might not be the best example here, but the principle is sound. The distance here from the real object to the mirror is going to be equal to the distance of the image to that plane. So what does this have to do with metal and things that reflect? Well, to get a reflective surface, that surface just needs to be very smooth and polished. If you want, you can read more about the physics of light and how it works with a mirror specifically. Google is your friend. But the shinier a piece of metal is, the more its faces are going to act like a mirror. So if I have this cube in this environment that I've quickly sketched with my pen here, it's going to reflect things in the environment. Now, you might say, well, it's floating in space, it's on the page. Well, nothing really is truly isolated in space. What you're going to have is you're going to have things. In the case of my studio here, I've got shelves, I've got lights, I've got my Mac Pro in the background. There's all this stuff that's going to be interacting with objects. And the shinier this cube is, if I had a nice chrome cube here, it's going to reflect those things in the environment. Now I'm going to imagine my environment to be fairly simple. Let's say from the front view, here's my cube, and it's resting on something that could be described as a table. Okay, and from the top you could say, okay, maybe this cube on this table has a relationship something like this, where the cube isn't actually, or the sides of the cube rather, aren't parallel to the sides of the table. Okay, so in this case we observe that we've got a table edge here, like so. If we had something like this, okay, where my cube is resting on a surface, how do those reflections work and how do they look? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, as always, light till I get it right, okay? And that's true through and through, and something that will help you throughout your sketching career. I'm just going to check this marker to make sure it's not totally dry, which actually gives me an opportunity to talk about why I like Copic markers so much. And I like them because, well, they're really well made. But two, you can always refill those markers. So I have here a bottle of ink, and I've got my marker. Just by putting a few drops inside here, like so. And I like to uncap the bottom so that there's nice airflow. And periodically check just to make sure that my tip on the bottom isn't getting super saturated. That looks pretty good. So now that I've added a few drops, recap my ink, recap the bottom, reinsert my nib, uncap the top nib so the ink will flow through. I suppose if I wanted to, I could stick my mouth on it and blow it, but that might not be good. Give it some time to flow through here, and looks like I'm rejuvenated. So I didn't have to go buy a new marker. I could just use these. So essentially, this is just a surface that's going to act like a mirror. And because it's a mirror, it's reflecting light evenly as it's represented in the scene. So I can, for example, just shade in these four surfaces, or three surfaces rather, with my marker. So there my ink is starting to come through the tip nicely there. And my back surface here. Again, I'm using a 30% gray marker. Okay, now the thing I like to do is I like to, at this point, decide where my reflections are going to be. So if I look at this edge, right, let's project this, let's pretend this is a big mirror. It's a really big mirror sitting on this table, this face. Okay, so I've essentially extended this line out and pretending that this is a mirror. So this point that's highlighted in that mint color, okay, is a certain distance from this edge, right there. And that distance needs to be represented going back. So let's see where that would go. Now in perspective, things that are further away appear shorter, and I'm just going to ballpark estimate. So if I take my pencil like this and just kind of pinch it and measure this distance to my mirror, I can't exactly go back that same distance because that's going to be shortened. And you might be wondering, well, how short should I make it? How much? Well, there is a mathematical and practical approach to this, but we don't have time to go over that in this video. What I'd like you to do though is just kind of eyeball shorten it, so, which sounds crazy, but I'm deciding that point is about here, okay? Same thing with this line. It's incident to the mirror at that point, right? Here's my angle. So the angle of reflection of that edge, I can go back to my point there. And so now what I've done is between these 2 points, here and here, I know exactly what that reflection is going to be. Now, as it's shown here, this surface is white, okay, that the object is resting on. But just to show it here in the rendering, I'm going to go ahead and shade that in with my 30% marker and create a gradient coming down. Like so. So this is the edge of the table reflected into that surface. Pretty cool, right? That sounded really weird. I'm sorry. Pretty cool, right? So I can do the same thing here. I've got this edge that's reflecting, or sorry, incident. I can look at that angle and come back this way. And I know there's going to be some point, this distance, back in here. Connect those two lines, which would give me my reflection on this far side. Okay, I can keep that strong. Well, what about above? Well, it really just depends on what's above. So if I had a nice bank of fluorescent light or some ceiling tile at a specific angle, I may see that reflected here. Okay, and usually I'll just throw some kind of style line or style marker on the top to indicate that something in the environment is being reflected on that top surface. Well, what about the edge of the table there? What's beyond that? Well, if the environment were white, you may see something like this, where there's a nice gradient from top down to the table, where we have that nice, distinct edge of the table right there. Okay? That's why we're seeing that. But if the environment were black, for example, okay, and we had this nice bright tabletop, what we could do is take something like a C7 marker here, outline above my table edge, and now I'm going to create a gradient from this point because I want some nice contrast there, moving up my cube. Okay, so there I have a nice dark section showing, right, the edge of this space as it goes out into darkness. We do the same thing on the other side here. Like so. Nice gradient, okay? So this mirror or this surface is reflecting that edge. This one on the left is reflecting this edge. What if we had something like a shadow coming right here? And we can really have fun with this. So now I've got a shadow on my table surface. Well, again, this is a mirror. That shadow is going to be reflected at the angle, right, here in my drawing. So let's shade that shadow in. On my tabletop surface here, I've got a nice shadow. Okay, so as it rests on the surface, this needs to now be reflected in. If it's a perfect mirror, you'll get a perfect tone to tone match in the mirror. If the surface is colored or if it's tonal in some way and not a perfect mirror, you're going to kind of get an overlay that won't be exactly the same tone. So here in my mirror, I've now got a line, and I'm just approximating where my shadow would reflect back in and off the edge of the table. And just to kind of help this along, I'm going to use my pencil here and shade that in. Same thing on these lines where my view is limited. Okay, and here as well, on this other face. And this is in shadow, this face rather, so I'm actually going to take my pencil and just over the whole thing, just lightly shade. And that's going to give me a subtle difference in the shade or tone from side to side. And because this is a shiny thing and it's got edges, it's going to get highlights on these edges. If you want to break out the gouache, I think I just ruined my brush. Okay, I saved it. So just breaking out the gouache here. Got a couple little highlights. Okay, right on those edges to help this feel more reflective. And on the top, you might be wondering, well, the top didn't get anything. What's up with that? Well, again, it really just depends on where and how it's lit. So, for example, if this really is some kind of lighting bank and the environment truly is dark, then the front of this cube, for example, would have a nice dark spot up until it meets that actual thing that's above, which is causing that hot spot or highlight. Okay, so it really just depends on, what's in your scene above and around your object. If there's something in between the light bank, you could show that as well, or maybe just a little bit of shading. As I tell my students that I teach, I say, as long as it looks good, I'm good with it. On the outside, since we're primarily using pen here, I'm going to take this fat Copic marker, since I can't find anything else right now, and just use the very tip of it to outline my cube here that we just sketched. Okay, last thing is if this surface actually happened to be reflective, we would get, right? So this is now a mirror, and there's an angle here, I, that's going to be equal to R. And so the reflection of this cube would be something like this. And I'll just shade this in with a pencil so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It looks weird, but actually what's happening is this is converging to the vanishing point that is now above my cube. So I get this effect of a reversal in convergence of the sides of my cube. Well, there you have it. That's an example of a cube that is very shiny, potentially made of metal. I've used gray to indicate the color, so you could kind of think of it as metal, and how, depending on the environment and what's in the environment, you would add reflections to the faces of that cube. So what next? Well, next time I'm going to take this technique and apply it to a real product. conceptual. So you can see how we would apply marker, shading, and tone to an object that is metallic or part metallic and has those reflections and has those characteristics. Thanks again for watching, and it's been fun. I really enjoy doing this. This is one of my great passions in life, and one thing you can do to help me out is just to, on my YouTube channel, I'm not sure where the button is exactly, but look out for a little red button that says subscribe and click that button. And what that'll do is, if you have a YouTube or Google account, it'll send you an email that says, hey, Spencer just posted a video, or Sketchaday posted a video, come check it out. And you'll be the first to know of everyone when that video goes up. And that way you can watch it, get a head start. If you want to watch it again, that's totally cool. That would be awesome. You can also follow me on Instagram at Sketchaday, DOTCOM, sketchaday.com, or on Facebook, facebook.com/Sketchaday. That's just another way to interact with me and some of my other fans. If you want to post some of your work in a comment thread, or say, hey, what's up, check out my work. I like to kind of see what you guys are up to. So thanks again, and be sure to join us next time.